If you're looking to run a well-balanced army at the tabletop with the miniatures that you own, one of the best things that you can do is what we teach on the Academy. It's called the SWOT analysis. This is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Codex, and in particular the Gladius detachment. We're going to run through everything that's great, some things that could have been better, some opportunities that you can bring in, and then also maybe some of those different things that you're going to have to bear in mind and watch out for when you're on the tabletop. And this way you're going to put a list together that you're going to really enjoy and have great mission play, be able to score those secondaries and also handle any threat that comes near you on the tabletop. So I really hope you enjoy this next lesson. This is part of our Masterclass subscription series, and if you enjoy this video and you want to get the rest of the videos from this Masterclass for all the different detachments and all the codexes that have been released by Games Workshop so far, then check out the link below. So I really hope you like this lesson.
It's time to take a deeper look at the Gladius Task Force by looking at a SWOT analysis. So S for strengths, W for weakness, O for opportunities, and T for threats.
Yes, and this is really going to help us understand exactly where our army fits in terms of its playstyle, and most importantly, then can lean you into some indication of how to write an army list to really get the most out of your models.
So let's start with that S then, so strengths. What are the strengths? What's this army good at?
Being versatile, I think, is its most important sort of, or biggest aspect. It really is versatile in the fact that when played correctly, that this army feels like it can do what it wants when it wants, and I think that's a really exciting dimension or a place to be for an army. So I think, yeah, versatility is key because you've got those doctrines. You tag me, cool, I can fall back and shoot. It's not a problem. I need to get that extended threat range for that time I want to use all my combat attacks, cool. Time to advance and charge. So it can really help you maximize the efficiency of all those units that you've taken.
Okay, fantastic. And we've kind of discussed all of this, and the doctrines themselves are all about sort of advancing and being able to do things, and you can do it in different places. Would you say that sort of manipulating threat ranges is one of the strengths of this army as well? Yeah,
100%. Like, that's exactly it. You can, by increasing your threat range, even potentially increasing your threat range, means that your opponent has to respect the threat range. So when you're asking me, a common question will be, how far can you charge, Steve? And I'll be like, well, I can move my aggressors 5, and then I can charge up to 12. So you know, well, if I stay 17 inches back, you can't even declare a charge against me. But you know I could put that unit in the assault doctrine, so you can add on another 6 to that.
Ah, right. Well, now I'm a bit too far back to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And this is going to cause me some problems.
Or if you do come too close, cool, I can trigger it. So now it allows me to really push you back, because that's going to be doing that every turn. Although I can't use it every turn, you still need to respect the potential threat range every turn. So there's certainly a way of, when you're trying to play around it, another variable that you need to constantly consider as well.
Yeah, and even if you've used the doctrine already that game, you've got access to that adaptive strategy stratagem.
Exactly.
So you can still do it on that one unit. So it's very, very threatening when it comes to those threat ranges.
And with that, it gives you the other strength, which is, okay, now I can increase my efficiency as well. So I need to make that charge. Well, I could risk a 9-inch charge. No, do you know what? I'll put my unit into the assault doctrine, roll a 3 or a 4. Cool, now I need a 6-inch charge. And when I get there, cool, I can really make the benefit of extra benefits from either my enhancements or my stratagem. So it can really help you out of a lot of sort of difficult decisions that you might make, because you can get extra reliability and remove dice from the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. From the combination of things like Oath of Moment to guarantee your hits, then your guaranteed combat by reducing the possibility of failing a charge or not being able to get line of sight, to then having a stratagem to hammer home with that extra AP.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. Some amazing strengths from this attachment. But as with all things, there are weaknesses. What's one of the main weaknesses for, I think, players of all skill using the Gladius Task Force?
I mean, players of all skill, you've got analysis paralysis. Can certainly, even top tier players, and we see this a lot even with top players, they tend to time out a lot, because it's, what's the best decision to make? Or should I, do I go, hang on. And what can end up happening is, in that command phase, and I suggest you all do this to a degree, is you map out what does my army look like if it can advance and shoot? Where do my units end up? What can I see? Okay, well, what if I went in the assault doctrine? Where do my units end up after my move, after a potential charge? What combats could I hit? But now where does my shooting attacks end up? Because if I go for that, I can't advance here. And if I advance with these heavy weapons, I can't advance with my combat units. So what are my charges? So now you kind of have to plan your entire turn in your command phase. And
to throw it into the mix, we've got the adaptive strategy. Yeah. Where you might go, okay, well, if I do it with the army, I could put this one unit into this doctrine.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So it really can take up so much time in the command phase. Yeah.
Right. But we do, of course, have some reactive stratagems as well.
Yeah.
So when do you squad tactics?
Exactly. Or do you save it and fight on death? So there's so many decisions to be made. And unfortunately, it can lead to people timing out at tournaments or being a not a very good opponent because they're taking up too much time off their opponents in their 3 hours allotted window. So yeah, certainly because the army's so flexible, it takes more times to make those decisions, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And my recommendation is if you are running Gladius and you are struggling with making your decisions, have something that we call a cheat sheet. Yeah. So you basically have a guide to what your doctrines are and the order you have to use them. And what I would do is I'd put under each doctrine, use assault doctrine if, and maybe have like 3 bullet points. Yeah. If 3 or more units will now be able to make combat. Something like that, and that'll just really help you reinforce that decision and save you a bit of time as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think for me, it's just like, am I in combat? Yes. Cool, tactical doctrine it is. That's it, because I want to be able to fall back, shoot, and charge something else.
Well, you might, by the end of the game, just not have used any of the doctrines because you're just like, oh, I'll save it, I'll save it.
Yeah. Well, that means you've played it extremely well, providing that you're actually winning. If you haven't, then yeah, you should have used them better. Yeah. And I think it's really telling somebody that plays this army well is going to do really, really well.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And when you use those in the wrong turns, then yeah, he's going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, both you and Jordan as well, another one under the team, have used Gladius extensively and done very well at tournaments. So it kind of shows that with a lot of experience, this can become the right army, but you still have to make all those decisions.
Yeah.
With Gladius being very balanced, obviously, one of the weaknesses there is that if you do come up against an army that you need one tool to deal with,
you don't have it.
You don't have it.
Yeah, so a skew list, for example, where an askew list is when somebody's like maybe taken a whole army of armigers, and you're like, oh, well, how do I get through that many toughness 10 or whatever it is with multiple wounds? Because actually, all these little guns that I've taken for all these little attacks to kill loads of horde are doing nothing now. And this army specifically is good at having a whole mix, or a skew army that just shoots. Because then, for example, your fight on death stratagem, well, you may as well not have it because you're never going to use it, right? Maybe squad tactics, maybe they don't need to get within 9 inches of you. So maybe that's 2 stratagems now that you're never going to use, right? So it all depends. And then maybe they're not going to charge you, so you're probably never going to be in combat to need to fall back and shoot, potentially. So again, that's another one where you might not really maximise the benefit out of it. So that can really vary, is who you're actually playing. Against a nice mixed list, Gladius is great. You should be able to out-versatile a versatile list. But if they've skewed heavy in one direction, then you might have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then I think one more weakness that's worth talking about is there's nothing inherent in the detachment that helps you towards mission play of any kind. There's no sort of buffs towards primary or any guide towards secondary.
No.
So would you say that we then have to look at our opportunities to try and fulfill some of these weaknesses?
Exactly that, yeah, 100%. And that's where we'll find out how do we plug some of these weaknesses.
Okay, so let's hit those opportunities right now. We mentioned that decision-making is an issue. Can you think of any ways to make decision-making a bit less of an issue?
Yeah, so like you mentioned earlier, the cheat sheet is often great, but the next thing is also practice. So the more times you can practice with this army, you are going to make those decisions faster and faster. Okay, so what position do you need to be in before you actually do the assault doctrine? Now, normally I wouldn't even think about it unless it's turn 2 or turn 3. I want to make sure that all my army is staged correctly. So is my army in the right place to maximize that, okay, where I will not fail a charge. You know, I want to be able to use my move and my advance to get myself within literally 3 inches of every single enemy unit that I need to for that kind of go turn as it was. Now obviously that can depend on, it will often be turn 3 for me if I'm going first, and it could often be turn 2 if my opponent's gone first, because they would have had more turns to get closer to me. There's been only on a rare few occasions have I ever actually used it in the first turn if my opponent's been super aggressive. So I think that's something that you do want to consider, is like, you know, you can literally start off with turn 1, is my Devastator Doctoring going to affect me like army-wide, or is it only going to affect one unit? If so, maybe it's better off saving it and keeping a CP in the pocket, or you just keep it and spend the CP. So it depends on, you know, how many units you've taken of what. Of course, another opportunity here is to make your decisions easy. So have one unit where that Devastator Doctrine really affects. Okay, so you could like lean heavy into combat and one unit that does, for example, the Devastator really, really well, or you take like, you know, a mixed army completely, but then the only issue is you might need to sub in some other characters. So for example, Marneus Calgar's great. Okay, Marneus Calgar's awesome as an opportunity to put into a Gladius Task Force because he gives you a command point, so that gives you a little bit of tactical flexibility for the rest of the army. And for his unit, he always gets advance in charge. And he also gets advanced fallback and shoot as well. So you get the most out of that unit. It's kind of like in all of the Doctrines at once anyway. So that's one less unit to worry about now. So putting him in the list really adds some sort of decision making, or breaks that down slightly, because then you've only got less brick units to focus on, is what you do what with.
Absolutely, and I love the idea of having those bricks, as you say, so you know that you use Dev Doctrine here, you use your Assault Doctrine here, and actually bringing in Marneus Calgar, we talked about command points, and I suppose one of the issues with the decision making with an army like this is you don't know where to commit command points. And once you have committed them somewhere, if you've made a mistake, then you can't really recover from that because you no longer have the command points. Yeah. So having Marneus, both his unit doesn't need the support from CP, but he also now gives you the opportunity to support someone else with CP as well. I think that's a fantastic include.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about mission play. So how can we improve our ability to hold primary objectives?
So you're going to have to just look at data sheets here. So for example, infiltrators to stop units dropping down within 12 inches. That's going to help you score points in a way that, well, not necessarily help you score points. What it's going to do is help the differential in score. It's going to prevent your opponent from scoring points. So you can look at your units to do that, right? So then you don't need to score as many points if your opponent isn't. So that's one way. The next way is just to look at the most efficient mission playing units that we have and just take those. So scout units, amazing. Because obviously they've got infiltrate, they've got scout, they can be in different places of the table. Assault instead with jump packs, nice and cheap. Drop them in, do some deep strikes, keep them on the board moving forward, do a screen. You know, there's lots of things that you can do with that, but you're mostly looking at utilising just the rawest data sheets that we've got available to play the mission for you. Assassins are an option, but again, if you wanted to keep it just in the book, then I would keep it just those data sheets, yeah. But you're gonna need to keep some points available for that in the list, which then does break down you know, because your army's not as versatile with doing the mission, it does then obviously mean that you've got less points to do damage with.
So time now to take a look at some threats. So these are the things you can't really control. What would one of these threats look like on the table?
Well, I'll tell you a few things that I hate against playing Michael. Anything that can fart on death, because my army is expensive. My units are quite elite. I don't want to go in, kill you, and then die in return. That does not sound like a good idea to me. So if you've got fart on death or fight first, we've got a bit of a problem. Okay, I need to be able to figure out how to tackle that without relying on, you know, my assault units to do so. Another thing I hate is high AP and high damage, because as soon as you start killing my Centurion Devastators, I lose a lot of my shooting output from the army. So yeah, that is a big significant problem for me, is yeah, because there's no invulnerable saves in this army. Okay, you can't rely on that. We don't really have many Storm Shields. There's a couple of units you could drop in, like Blade Guard or Terminators or Vanguard Vets, but largely with Space Marines, we just got a 3+ armor save. So yeah, high AP, bit of a problem.
Yeah, and I guess with the fight on death, fights first also comes into that department as well, because there's not really a way of getting around fights first.
No.
And your units are, if they're going into combat, sure, you can advance as much as you want. You can have all the threat ranges you like. Yeah. But if they're going to hit you before you get to fight, then your only opportunity then is fight on death yourself.
Yes.
And that now takes 2 CP out of your decision making, right? And you can't use those elsewhere.
Yeah. The other thing that I hate as well is when I get penned in my deployment zone.
Right.
When I can't move out and I can't push, then yeah, I can't get into my stages where I want to be sort of putting up the threat. So I love it when my army can go first. That's great, because what I don't want you to do is press me aggressively, because otherwise I might have to innate the assault doctrine too early on, and then I lose my threat ranges from the army later on in the game.
Fantastic. And I guess part of that could also be if your opponent has a huge number of assets starting in no man's land, and they can set up things like move blocks as well. And obviously, as you'll see for most of these detachments, actually sprinkling in that opportunity, scout squads, and other units that have infiltrate is a great way of preventing that early turn pressure.
Exactly that, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much for going through some of that. Hopefully when you're writing your Gladius lists now, you'll have a good idea from these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, how you can adapt your list to counter each of those, and when to look out for opponents that have specific things in their army and what questions to ask them at the table as well.
Nice.
And with that, Stephen, let's move on to your list. I'm intrigued to see what we've got in there, and we'll do that in the next lesson.
So hopefully you enjoyed that lesson and got some value from it, and you see a much better way to play your Space Marines. Now, if you do want to get your hands on the rest of the Masterclass series, then you can get your first month at half price. So check out the link below and get signed up for the Masterclass subscription series.